In this module, I'm going to take you through a few use case examples so you can get a better understanding of how BizFlow can be applied. Using my browser, I'm going to enter my login information and sign in. And so I'm signing into the BizFlow web client at this point. We're assuming that our end users would have access to this information, our employees, managers, and so on. BizFlow is a role-based application. Based on your role, is going to determine what views or workspaces you see when you log in. In this particular case, I have my work area, and because I have rights, I also have administrative functions or access. And these are all of the various types of administration that you can do in BizFlow, which we'll talk about in another course. In the work area, again, based on my role, based on what types of things I might need to do, I may be shown one or more menus. And you can see here that I have the standard BizFlow menu. This is how BizFlow is configured when you install it initially. And then organizations can create their own custom menus. It's very easy in BizFlow to configure a menu that suits a particular process or a particular group. Here you can see a much more simplified menu where I simply have access to my work, things that have been assigned to me, a monitor so that I can check work in progress, and I have a URL website link. If I were a manager of a department, perhaps I would have simply a way to monitor work in progress for my employees or my staff. I might have specific reports and dashboards. So you can see that BizFlow can be tailored to meet the needs of the process or the organization. Here I have my work list. These are the things assigned to me. Again, just like an email inbox, this is work that I have to do. And I can, of course, filter this work. I can look at things that are only my work explicitly, or things that were assigned to the group that I belong to or groups that I belong to. I can search my list of work, and I can do various other things with my work list. I can also sort my inbox based on different columns. You can also see that BizFlow highlights and shows you what items are overdue. So I can see very quickly at a glance what work needs my more immediate attention. Let's start at the beginning and let's start a new workflow and then follow it through. And we'll start a simple workflow. We're going to start the travel request process. And first, what we can do is we can view the process as it was designed by the process designer. And we see a very simple process. We see a process where an employee is going to complete the travel request. They're going to submit that request to be approved. And if it's approved, it will go to the end. And if it's disapproved, it's going to route back to our employee. To start the process, I simply click on the name, or I can use the start option. This then launches an appropriate form. So this form was linked to the first activity or first step in the process, and then I could complete and fill out the form. Once I complete the form, I have the option to attach documentation. So if there was some type of document I would like to attach, I can open up the attachment and comments panel, and I can add a new attachment. You can do that by dragging and dropping files right over this area, or selecting Add New and browsing your desktop for the file that you want to attach. And you can attach any type of file. There's no limits to the type of file. It could be PowerPoint, Word, a web page, text file, image document, anything that you want to attach to the process. Once I've made any attachments, perhaps made any posts or comments I might want to make on this item, I can then complete the item, and that's then going to move it to the next step in the process. At this point, I'm acting as both the employee and the manager in both roles. The work then, therefore, for the approval step comes into my inbox. I now see that I have an approved travel request item waiting in my inbox, and that was just received this morning. And I can open this item, again, any number of ways, clicking on the link or selecting open. And I can now see the information that was previously provided by the employee that submitted this form. I can see the attachment and I can click on that and open the attached information. At this point, I can make a comment and simply save this item. I can send it back to the employee, or I can complete it. I'm going to disapprove the item, and then we'll see what happens next. If I were the employee and I wanted to know the status of this request that I had made, one of the key characteristics of BizFlow is the ability to monitor work in progress. I can now take a look and see my travel request in the active instances. These are running cases or running workflows. And I can open up this item and look at the monitor for this item. And the monitor basically acts as an audit trail, and it tracks all of the activity. It's also a visual tool. I can see that by following the blue lines that this was the first step in the activity, or the first step in the process. It transitioned to the second step and then it looped back. So presently the green icon or the green color coding indicates that that's where we are in the process presently. And we can see that where the blue has occurred, that's what's already had transpired. At the bottom, we can then see the detailed audit history for this particular travel request. We can see that the travel request, when it was originally created and who completed it, who then approved it, and who now is currently pending approval, or whose inbox it is presently sitting in. And then any attachments that are made to the process, any discussions that are posted on this particular item, they can all be viewed from this area. And we can also open up the form itself. So by clicking on the icon where it says view work item, I can actually view the form itself that was submitted. So that's how we get visibility into our processes. That was a really very basic, simple process in BizFlow. Let's take a look at some process that's a little bit more sophisticated. We'll take a look at this RMA process, and again, we'll view the process as it was designed initially. You can clearly see that this process is much more sophisticated. We have a lot more activities. You can see that there are a lot more roles or departments involved in this particular flow, but it has some of the same characteristics. We start and complete, in this case, an RMA request, and then it's then routed throughout the organization appropriately based on information contained within that request. We also have various decision points in this model. So in not only can we do serial type of routing, but we can also do parallel type of routing or rule and decision driven routing. So when we reach certain points in the model, we may take both paths simultaneously, or we may branch down a particular path based on some value that's been evaluated in that form. In this case, if the RMA should be scrapped, and there's a field in the form that says, this should be scrapped, then it's going to go down one path in the process, versus if it needs to be put back into inventory, it's going to go down another path in the process. We can see when we start this particular workflow, we now have a more sophisticated form. So our form now has sections. We can do things like pre-populate information. So we're pre-populating the RMA ID. We're pre-populating the current date and time. And we can add things like tooltips and validation to make sure that the information as it's entered is correct. We can mandate that certain fields are in fact mandatory. And in this screen, we see all of the sections of the form. It's also possible to show and hide sections of the form. In this particular application, each group is progressively adding more information to the form. So in the first activity, really only the first section of fields is required. And so it is possible in BizFlow also to hide and show and enable and disable sections of the form as they correlate or correspond to the various activities in the flow. And this is an example of that same form. It's currently at the second step in the flow, And what we now see is we still see that pre-populated ID and date. We see that the first section of the form is completed, but it's disabled. So the individual at this second step in the process can't modify this data. However, the second portion of the form is now displayed for this person to enter that information. However, they also still don't see those downstream portions of the form. Now that you've seen two fairly simple and fundamental applications implemented in BizFlow, in the next module I want to focus on more of a case management use case, a much more complex application, and not only how the end user would interact with that application, but also a little bit behind the scenes of how that application is designed.